So for the benefit of those so we're going to look at some theoretical ideas behind the approach that we've been taking in this course. We start with the question of, did the Egyptians build pyramids? And there's two answers to that. One is obviously yes, but two is it's a trick question because we say everybody built pyramids. Egyptian pyramids, Mesopotamian ziggurats, Mayan pyramids, Buddhist stupas, and maybe even Gothic cathedrals and many others, as we'll see. And the second point is we're going to see that each culture goes through a lifespan of about 1,000 years, and that they only build pyramids very early in that lifespan, then they never build them again. So we're rejecting a linear approach to history that goes prehistoric, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Middle Ages, Renaissance, up to modern, and criticizing that as Eurocentric. And instead, we've been looking at a series of cultures as independent entities. And the key high civilizations, okay, and high civilizations are based on massive, large-scale agriculture. They have statecraft, they build nation-states and then empires, etc. Have been Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greco-Roman, Western, Chinese, Islamic, Meso and South American, Indian, Russian. These are these high civilizations. Now notice, with one exception, there's a band right across here. I'm pretty sure you can make the case that somebody brought this over to here. These pyramids are just too similar. Step pyramid, stairs on four sides, temple on the top, body of a snake for the railing, head of the snake down here. You know, somebody was traveling around. So we get this approach from two figures. One of them is Oswald Spengler in a book, Decline of the West. And he says, which I've repeated many times, the culture begins by laying down its epic poem and its temple form. There have been several high cultures. He says, what causes one to come about? He says, cultures bloom with the randomness of the wildflowers of the field. They last about 1,000 years, then enter a civilization phase. They go through a development, which he uses a seasonal and also organic metaphor for, spring, summer, autumn, winter. And each culture has a prime symbol. Each culture has a psychology, what it's about. So, just taking three examples, yeah.
So, does it like a circle or just leave it?
No, each culture dies and another one springs up somewhere else. When Egypt's over, it's over. Egypt does not become Greece. Egypt dies, Greece happens somewhere else.
But my feeling is good, like one culture because like that was just premature and goes very high technology, then died, and then like kind of Renaissance rebirth, but still as a
I'm rejecting that. Okay, because notice if we look at those Gothic, there's a famous quote by Victor Hugo. The Renaissance was the setting sun that all of Europe mistook for dawn. In other words, you're telling me that people who built Gothic cathedrals were technologically backwards? This is 300 years before the Renaissance. This was you know, the Egyptians, the Westerners, the Western Europeans had their act together from the beginning. They built those Gothic cathedrals between 1100 and 1300. Then they stopped. No more grand cathedrals. There's some political buildings like St. Peter's, but it's not like a Gothic cathedral. Those Gothic cathedrals were, the tallest one is Beauvais, 157 feet to the underside of the ceiling. That means you could put Willoughby Dorm in the nave of Beauvais, stand on the roof, it's still 20 feet to the under part of the how'd they do that if they were primitive or they had lost their technology? And the point is, they were very sophisticated. Now, the Renaissance was very good at propaganda, saying we're the real deal, but it had already happened 200-300 years earlier. A couple of cultures we're familiar with. Egypt, prime symbol is the way. You move through the stages of your life in a prescribed course. The Egyptian temple has a narrow axis. There were causeways approaching the pyramids. Temple form is the pyramid, including its processional. The epic poem is the Book of the Dead. For Greeks, the prime symbol is the bodily whole. Greeks abhorred in mathematics. For the Greeks, there's one number between 1 and 3. 2. For the West, there's an infinite number of numbers. Numbers are not solid objects, discrete wholes, but are functions that are continuous. So, 1.00001 is just as much a number as 1 or 2. The Greeks freaked out about things like irrational numbers, and I ran into the square root of 2 and discovered it was an irrational number. The Pythagoreans executed people who let the secret out. We can't let anybody know that. Epic poem for the Greeks, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The temple, the Greek temple. For the West, the prime symbol is the conquest of infinite space and time. Spengler wrote this in 1920. He knew we were going to go to the moon. Epic poem, the Arthurian romances. We looked at that last week. Temple, the Romanesque and Gothic cathedrals. So every culture has begins by laying down its epic poem in its temple form, and they manifest in literature and form the prime symbol or underlying psychology of the culture. Now, this is Mimi Lobell, my late wife, and she describes 7 stages that a culture went through. So we saw 4 by Spengler. She goes into much more detail. So a culture begins in sensitive chaos, which we described as Paleolithic hunter-gatherers. So the civilization is Paleolithic nomadic hunter-gatherers in egalitarian bands. The psyche is prenatal. If you imagine the earth or even the universe as the Great Mother, you are in the womb of the Great Mother. So these people we saw at the beginning of that movie, Apocalypto, existed in the body of the earth. That green canopy that they lived in was a living within the body of the universe. Prenatal oneness in a natural spirit world. And we have shamanism. The space was an animated landscape. So they don't exist in a grid, but in patterns of meanings. So all pre-Neolithic period, hunter-gatherers today, just a few left. Australian Aborigines, Inuit Eskimos, Kongsun pygmies, some Amazonian Indians, and rainforest dwellers. Next, they lived in a world of these animal powers, which we see depicted in, for example, the caves of Lascaux. Very organic lifestyle. This is a pygmy village, and the women build the huts with these branches and then layering in leaves. And this is a mapping of a village over 2 weeks. So a woman will build, say, her hut facing the hut of her friend. She gets into a fight with her friend, she picks up the hut and turns it around so the entrance is facing the other way. It's what's the parallel today? Unfriending. And Australian Aborigines go on walkabout, which establishes their territory, which they mark with their art and the burial of their dead. Next we have the Great Round. Okay, this is what we saw as Neolithic. And so we have early Neolithic farmers in settled villages and egalitarian, and matrilinear clans, so female-centered societies. Village socialism and beginnings of some important technologies, pottery, domestication of animals, agriculture, irrigation, metallurgy, and woven fabric. The psyche, infancy and childhood. It's though you've been born from the body of the mother, the body of the universe, but you're glommed onto it like a baby nursing. Space is the womb cavern, which we saw. Where did we see that? The womb cavern. Maltese temples and Newgrange Passage Mount. Examples: Newgrange, Anasazi and Pueblo Indians. These cultures in China, the Yangshuo, etc. And so you have settled village, permanent architecture, domestication of animals, and agriculture. And some of our architectural examples: Çatalhöyük in Turkey, and here is a chapel with a goddess figure with a bull's head giving birth to bulls. Next to it are female breasts, the nipples are indented, and there are vulture beaks in the nipples. The universe gives birth and takes back in death. Entering the religious edifice, you're entering the body of the goddess. Here's the slit of the female genitals. At the hymen stone, at the entrance, this is in the wrong place. This is the entrance here to Newgrange, but same thing. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Maltese Temple. And the other example we looked at is Newgrange Passage Mount. And we enter into this cross-shaped form, entering the body of the goddess. An example of quite a developed culture of this period is the Minoan Crete, which was destroyed by great earthquake and volcano. Okay, then we have the emergence of the individual male ego. And with that comes the four quarters. Me, I, is identified. I stand here. So this is Bronze Age hierarchical chieftainships. We now have patrilineal tribes. The descendancy comes from the male. Caste systems, warrior aristocrats, blacksmiths, horses. The psychology is that of the adolescent, rise of ego and will. You read the opening, what's the opening word, or it's in some translations a single word in the first sentence of the Iliad, referring to Achilles. Rage. Agamemnon has taken away his sex slave, and he's having a fit, and he's refusing to fight, and now the Greeks are in trouble because he won't fight. It's like gang warfare. It's a bunch of adolescent male egos. Space is fortified camps, towns, and castles with gates at the cardinal axes. The Mycenaean Greeks were of this culture. Celts, Vikings. The Iliad is about the Mycenaeans. Vedic India. Now, each of these is not any one culture. Every culture goes through this stage. So we look at these four-quartered images. You go to the Metropolitan Museum and look at the Egyptian collection, and you'll find, which is in chronological order, these glass cases on the way in where there are all of these four-quartered images. Well, first, you find these spirals, and then you find these vessels with spirals, and then you find the four-quarter images. So now we have the emergence of the adolescent male hero who slays the dragon. The dragon is the animal of this Mother Earth. And so the adolescent male is a dragon slayer. What had been a powerful goddess figure is now the maiden who is rescued, carried off by the adolescent male warrior. And this is in every culture. So we see these are the people of the Greeks of the Iliad and the Odyssey, Scythians. The Dogon that we looked at were four-quarter people. Now, the Plains Indians, Apaches and Navajo, are four-quarter people. The Hopis that live right next door are Neolithic people. Totally different culture. They look the same, but when you understand these cultural manifestations, totally different. This is from a beautiful book called Gardens of War about New Guinea tribal people who spend all their time at war. Hopefully nobody gets killed. So you stand on this watchtower, then you holler, the enemy is coming. Everybody runs out, jumps up and down, throws a few spears, hopefully nobody gets hurt, and everybody goes home. But this is the culture, it's war, because they are dominated by this adolescent male ego. Four quarters. This is the Mycenaean Megaron, and we know a lot about Megarons because it's described in the opening of the Odyssey. Odysseus' wife tells her son Telemachus, go see, what's his name? And ask him what news you have of Dad. And he visits him in his Megaron, which is very in detail described. We have 4 columns, and then we have a fire in the middle, keep warm, but also for sacrifice to the gods, who are now in the sky rather than in the earth. Here's a Roman military camp, 4 quarters. Here is a dozen cultures. This one's from China, but it could be a dozen others of this 4-quartered universe. Each of the directions has elements, colors, minerals, etc. This is a medicine wheel in North America. Exact same thing from that period in that culture. Christ is a 4-quarter deity from that period in the Middle East. Quetzalcoatl is the same figure, 4-quartered deity. So Christ's cross is the 4 quarters, and Quetzalcoatl, born of a virgin, associated with a cross, dies and resurrects. Same thing. Every culture has one at this period. Next is the pyramid. So when we look at Egyptian pyramids, this is well into the culture. They've been busy for hundreds of years. Now emerges a theocratic nation state. It's conquered a lot of one of these 4-quarter Bronze Age warrior chieftains, conquers others and unites them into a nation. So it's a classical era, a golden era of high civilizations, nation and city-states, theocratic dynastic rule. That means the king is also the high priest and probably a god kings, class structures, and the pyramid is symbolic of, among other things, the pyramidal class structure. The psyche is adulthood, union of heaven and earth. The purpose of the pyramid is to bring down heavenly powers to this earth. It's an axis along which heavenly powers can come down into this earth, usually into the king or pharaoh or priest king, and is then available to everybody else. You can't get it directly. Only the priest king can get it. Space is a world mountain, is pyramid. So the importance of the world mountain, if you don't have one, we build one. It's a pyramid, ziggurat, stupa, all the same things. Vast hierarchical cities. Examples: Old Kingdom Egypt. New Kingdom Egypt does not build pyramids. Sumer and Akkad, Teotihuacan, Mayan, we looked at, etc. Every culture goes through this pyramid. Anybody guess what's next? Well, here's our pyramids. And here's the point. Here's Mount Fuji, pyramid in Japan. If you don't have one, you build a world mountain. Mesopotamia, Mayan, Egyptian, Borobudur, Buddhist, in Indonesia, in Cambodia, Angkor Wat. They are all in a pyramid shape. It's much more than that. You look at the culture of the people who build that thing, and they exhibit these characteristics. So if we're looking at another, if we're 4-quarter Bronze Age warrior chieftains, they don't build pyramids. So what's next? So we could argue the Greek temple appears at this point in Greek cultural development. The Gothic cathedral appears at this point in Western cultural development. And then we get empire. So what was the nickname we gave to Louis XIV? He is the Sun King. And what's my point going to be? Every emperor is a Sun King. The Chinese emperor is a Sun King. The Incan emperor was a Sun King. This is not something Louis XIV just made up. This is when you're the emperor, you're the Sun King. Every emperor is a Sun King. You build a great palace with the radiant axes. So the civilization is the age of imperialism. You conquer your neighbors. Vigorous military expansion, colonialism, slavery, corrupt nation, corrupt state religion, aristocratic court, growing bureaucracy. The psyche is of middle age, inflated ego. I don't think I have this slide, but there are sculptures that Ramses II made of himself. Talk about inflated ego. Let's just jump over here. So, this is no longer the period of pyramids in Egypt. We're now in a period of radiant axis, empire. I don't spell. Fortunately, Google fixes it. We should have some people here for scale, but people would be a little bit smaller than that. This is Ramses. Here's his wife. You think this guy had an ego? This is Abu Simbel in Egypt. So, elaborate palaces with harems and botanical gardens and zoos. Why? What's going on with the harems, botanical gardens, and zoos? You have women from all the parts of your empire. You have animals from all the parts of your empire. You have plants from all the parts of your empire. That's what harems, botanical gardens, and zoos are. They are showing the power and extent of your empire. Radiating roads, obelisks, domes of heaven, solar imagery, the Sun King, formal gardens, colossal art, and colossal art, we just saw that in Egypt. No, we also see that New Kingdom Egypt, Assyria, Persian, Roman Empire, Mughal empires in India, Yan and Ming China, Aztec, Incan, Versailles, Washington, D.C., all exhibit these characteristics. So, here's Versailles, here's the palace, here's the radiating axes. This is also the chariot of Apollo, and these stables are right there, symbolic of the horses drawing the chariot. Here is Apollo with his horses. Apollo is the sun god. Louis XIV is the Sun King. Here is a plan. Here are these formal gardens, these axes to infinity. Now, take a look at that. Here's Washington, D.C. This is not the plan that L'Enfant built. This was designed around 1900, after the Spanish-American War. America took not only Cuba, but the Philippines. The Philippines is like Hawaii is the middle of the Pacific. The Philippines are right up against the coast of Asia. So America becomes a global empire with the Spanish-American War. And so here's Washington, D.C., our radiant axes. Exact same thing we see at Versailles. Here is the Forbidden City in China with its radiant axes. The Mughal Empire, the radiant axes of the Taj Mahal. True of all the empires. And a dome of heaven. Here in Rome, in the Pantheon, China, and the Eastern Roman Empire. Finally, the grid, the world of the bureaucrat, post-imperialistic commercial industrial conglomerates, republics, communism, democracy, bureaucracy, technocracy, mass production. What does that sound like? Hello, we're living in it. That's our world today. And the point is that the West is entering this stage. Rome was exactly like this in 300 AD. The West is not the first civilization to enter this stage. The psyche is old age, deflated ego, alienation, anonymity, existentialism, loss of spirit. Sound like today? Extreme technologos, secular culture, materialism, excessive rationalism. Space is the marketplace. Good engineering but little innovation in art and architecture. Grid layouts. Examples: Hellenistic Greece, Ptolemaic Egypt, Europe and America since Industrial Revolution, communist nations. So we impose this grid on all of experience, like Manhattan. So if how many people drive around New York? Okay, so if you get to the Village, it's like a zoo, right? So that's because these are little towns that were formed in the 1700s, each with its own grid. And then finally, I think it's 1811, you get the commissioner's plan that says, let's just lay down a grid on the whole thing. So once you get above the Village, once you get above Houston Street, it all makes sense. It's easy. Unless you have bad traffic like we do now. And then somebody got the great idea of dropping Central Park in here, fortunately. That was not part of the original plan. And here we are, the expansion across the United States, movement westward. Washington, D.C., the federal government took control of all the land, and then would have land rushes where you could claim your parcel. And it was laid out by bureaucrats in Washington on this grid. And, like totally oblivious that they're running into mountain ranges. So this is some western city, I forget, I think it's Cincinnati or something. This grid marches across the western landscape. Here it is in the modern office. Here it is in an Egyptian labor camp of pyramid builders. Here it is in the capital of Mongolia, spreading all over the world. And then finally one more, which is death, dissolution. Civilization's breakdown of social structures. Psyche is death, survivalism, nihilism, opportunistic worldview, scavenging. Space is the wasteland, charnel ground, apocalypse. Examples: Egypt, 100 to 700, post-Hellenic Greece, fall of the Roman Empire. How many people have watched any episodes of The Walking Dead? There we are. Why would that show be so popular? It's the #1 show on TV. Because people say, that's the world we're living in.